That this is the beginning, introduction to Agenda 21 and how it affects us here. So please help me welcome our speaker for the evening, Ms. Andrea Zinga.
Thank you so much for coming when I know at least half of you would like to be out there covering up your plants. And by the way, Chuck filled the truck with used bed sheets, old bed sheets, $5 a piece. You know, this is the most cameras I have been on since I left the anchor desk. And of course, wouldn't you know, my contact lens just ripped in pieces yesterday, so I'm doing the Harry Carey thing. Holy cow. Well, by now, I am aware that these meetings are full of intelligence and curiosity and knowledge, and so I do consider it a real honor to have been asked to speak tonight. My subject is Agenda 21. It's here. It's in Rock Island County. How many here know a little about it? A little bit about Agenda. Okay, quite a few of you. Some of you here know a great deal about it. I am not an expert, but I'm here to give you a working familiarity with what Agenda 21 is and how it happened and what it's doing. This is a United Nations initiated plan. It's been around since 1992, but it is just getting noticed across America. It came out of the Earth Summit. Do you remember the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro? Many people concerned about Agenda 21 believe it's encroaching on our rights, especially and most visibly, personal property rights. Personal property. And I think it's fair to say that most of us here tonight own property. What if I suggested to you that our president and the administration are interested in more government involvement and control of our lives? Ah, you're laughing. Novel idea, right? That does appear to be the goal of Agenda 21. Control. All under a very noble-sounding term, which is sustainability. What's sustainability? Well, I went to the authoritative source, Wikipedia, and actually it had a very good definition of sustainability. Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now that doesn't sound so bad, exactly. But there is very heavy emphasis on needs, in particular, and I am quoting here, the essential needs of the world's poor, to which overriding priority should be given. To do that, Agenda 21 promotes goals that are more European socialist than they are American. And at this point, I would like to interject something. You know, when you start to talk about Agenda 21 or study it, wow, it's like you have just been hit by an avalanche and everyone is handing you things about Agenda 21. But a couple of our regulars just gave me this, and I think this is very nice. How sacred is your property? The essential difference between capitalism and Marxism is the ownership of property. In a capitalist system, individuals own and control the use of property. In a Marxist system, property belongs to the community, and its use is controlled by the government. Agenda 21 and the sustainable development policies it contains are constructed on the idea that property should belong to the community, and its use should be controlled by the government. So, Agenda 21 promotes goals that look at private land ownership as inferior to public land ownership for the good of the many. And if this sounds like socialism, Marxism, or communism to you, well, because once you start redistributing wealth, where do you stop exactly? And isn't this, in the process, trampling on a variety of the rights we prize here as Americans, including personal property rights? If you're taking any notes, and you might want to take a couple, sustainability is a good word to jot down. When you hear about sustainability, it's a fair assumption that you're hearing Agenda 21 at work. Now, what does Agenda 21 mean? Well, nobody's really defined it, but I think it would be kind of a dot thing for us to say it's the agenda for the 21st century. Now here's a recent quote, because I'm going to give you a little window into each side throughout tonight. You know, I do have to remind you I was a reporter for many, many years, and I took a lot of pride in looking at both sides. So, the Tennessean, which is a newspaper in Tennessee, note that, says this: little known, even in environmental and planning circles until recently, Agenda 21 has grabbed the attention of conservative groups who say the document calls on national and local governments to pursue environmental goals by limiting property rights and freedom. That is how the newspaper wrote about it. Well, you know, any agenda from the UN, especially an agenda for an entire century, is going to spawn a downright dizzying array of councils and coalitions and consortiums and task forces with, as the song goes, strange-sounding names. So we have NGOs, and we have the ICLEI, and the UCLG, long, lofty, vague goals and names and acronyms, which is why Americans' eyes tend to glaze over, and Agenda 21 goes largely unnoticed. Take the ICLEI. This is very important if you're taking notes. ICLEI. It is, in what I consider something of an oxymoron, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. Ah yes, environmentalism. Where sustainability is, environmentalism cannot be far behind. Now, the ICLEI has lots of member communities and governing bodies. Rock Island is a member of the ICLEI. Peoria is a member of the ICLEI. And so is Springfield. And so is bigger. Yes, thank you, Chicago. So, time to take another note about Agenda 21. There are 3 E words which are important to the lexicon of Agenda 21, and they are these: environment or ecology, economy, and social equality. Do you remember the Biosphere Project? 1991. Agenda 21, 1992. Put people in a bubble out west and see how little land they can use. Now, I want to juxtapose that with an interesting published quote from something called the Wildlands Project. Oh man, I go, so what's the Wildlands Project? The Wildlands Project has been at work in North America since 1991, just about the time of the Biosphere and the birth of Agenda 21. Now, these folks are very concerned about animal species, and they want to have interconnected habitat corridors without any human taint on them to help species stay vigorous. But here's what they propose in a work they published, and I really want you to pay attention to this, please. Quote, we must convert at least 50%, half, 50% of North America to wilderness, off limits to human beings. Then, these core areas of wilderness are to be interconnected by wilderness corridors, off limits to human beings. These will be surrounded by buffer zones with limited resource use under the supervision and permitting of the federal government in collaboration with non-governmental organizations, such as the Wildlands Project. NGOs are important partners in the Agenda 21 scheme of things. Okay, something's missing from this plan. What's missing? How about the Americans who live in North America? Here's the end of the quote. The human population is to be resettled in the remaining 25% of land into communities described as sustainable communities. End quote. Like biospheres, or public land for the good of many, like the Hunger Games. How many of you have read or seen the Hunger Games? Oh, go, see, read. Very important. And just so you can compare today, actual fact, with that environmentalist vision of utopia, 40% of the land of North America is already owned by governments, federal, state, and local. Okay, this sounds like the plot of some dark, futuristic movie, and speaking of which, The Hunger Games. Because in Suzanne Collins' plot, in a parceled remnant of what obviously was once the United States, most of the residents are now clustered in densely populated areas, while the 1%, if you will, have all the beautiful surroundings and the technical toys and the food. Now, once a year, the government forces 24 teenagers from the provinces who are chosen by lottery into a contest of survival until only one remains. All die but the one. The reason for all this is that once, long ago, the people revolted. Well, I suppose it's not much of a leap that folks now are seeing a bigger agenda to the Hunger Games. They are seeing it as anti-Agenda 21. When we finish, we're going to give you a handout of an analysis of the Hunger Games by a man named David Hodges. It's Hodges' belief that Collins is warning in her work that the government is going to be playing hardball with us all very soon if we don't wake up to its long-term agenda, like, well, Agenda 21. Contemplate Hodges' thesis that the Hunger Games is about the people fighting back. He says this about the movie and the books. Parents have been provided a rare, mainstream, originated opportunity to educate their children on the innate need human beings have to live in freedom. Now, with apologies to the elected officials who are here, good luck finding an elected official who knows very much about Agenda 21. I have to tell you that when I was a candidate, I heard about every issue I had ever known of, and quite a few that I would never have dreamed of, but I never heard a word about Agenda 21. I think part of the reason is it's just a dull topic. I mean, take the concept for the future, wrap it in a number of different goals, wrapped in a lot of vague language, throw in more Agenda 21 spawned groups than a centipede has legs, and mix with the United Nations. Not a very exciting subject, is it? In fact, it's boring. And that dull cover would enable encroachment, because as I said, Americans aren't paying attention. Now, for another thing, Agenda 21 is a UN plan. Congress has never approved a single phrase related to Agenda 21. Agenda 21 was designed to be non-binding, not a threat in and of itself. The potential threat is how it's working its way into our smallest American communities, and I'm going to give you 4 ways in which that's happening. Number 1, through our presidents. President George H.W. Bush signed off on Agenda 21 in Rio de Janeiro. President Clinton lost no time in setting up the President's Council on Sustainable Development, taking Agenda 21 to our towns and cities. This past June, Mr. Obama, I'm sorry, I am so glad I'm not on the news anymore, because to say President and to say Obama in the same phrase would just kill me. Mr. Obama, this past June, created the White House Council on Rural America, expanding the Agenda 21 plan into our farm communities. Now, both those councils came about through executive order, bypassing the Congress and the courts. Agenda 21 does not need to work through legislation to work. There's the soft approach, this is number 3, to our cities and small towns through the ICLEI I told you about, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. 6,000 towns and cities belong to this, and you can Google it and see who. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, works closely with the ICLEI. HUD has a 2,000-page legislative land use handbook. It's in use by many, many local governing units. So Agenda 21 happens not through legislation, not through laws, it happens through regulation, none of which appears to be authorized by the U.S. Constitution. It's been called a huge and illegal land grab. Number 4, the last in the march of Agenda 21, is simply the carrot on the end of the stick. Grants. federal grants with, just like that carrot, strings attached. Some communities and states are feeling a little too tied up by those strings, and they seem to be deciding it's not worth it. But with the condition of the economy, and with states like Illinois, which I call grasshopper states because we play and spend, and then we'll worry next winter about how to pay for it, grants can still look oh so good. There are so many fingers to Agenda 21. It's reaching into America's energy programs, education, farm management, food standards. The list is pretty dazzling. Here's what the Heritage Foundation said. Ready to trade in your car for a bike or maybe a subway ride? Interested in fewer choices for a home, paying more for housing and being crammed into a denser neighborhood? You can have all this and more if radical environmentalists and smart growth advocates have their way and local, state, and federal governments impose the policies set forth in the United Nations Agenda 21. I'm going to direct you now to a couple of websites and a couple of experts. One site is freedom21.org. This comes recommended by the people I know who are the most expert in Agenda 21. Another I came across is morph.com, where there's a lexicon of catchphrases and words that alert us to Agenda 21's presence. Two biggies are any version of the word sustainable and any phrase with smart attached. Smart grids, smart growth, smart meters. You caught that reference to non-governmental organizations. The acronym NGO, like the phrase land use, should be a red flag that Agenda 21 is lurking in the background. Well, now, you know, this is heavy stuff. Mike alluded to it earlier. It smacks of conspiracy theory, doesn't it? You know, for the longest time, the leading Illinois voice on Agenda 21 peppered me on the topic. And at first, I just kind of ignored any email she sent me that said Agenda 21. And then I took my peppering with quite a few grains of salt. Because, after all, the Bible charges man with stewarding the land, with control over all the beasts of the air and the birds of the field. The environment and God's creatures are worth saving. So maybe we should be planning ahead on the topics of land use and food production and transportation and population control and the environment. Maybe the person who wrote that stuff about corralling humans into 25% of the land was just getting carried away. Maybe Suzanne Collins has never even heard of Agenda 21. Maybe she just rolled together a bunch of big hits, you know, everything from Survivor on TV to Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery. Ever read that? Boy, that was the shocker in my day, The Lottery. Back when we still trusted our government and we still trusted our neighbors. You have to ask again, though, at what point does planning become over-planning? And at what point does over-planning become violation of American personal rights? I mean, this is not Europe. This is the United States. So far. And if you do an online search, you will get an avalanche, like I said. Some governing bodies are becoming alarmed. The Tennessee State House, 3 weeks ago, passed a resolution condemning Agenda 21 as a, quote, destructive and insidious effort to advance a communist agenda through the guise of community planning. Environmentalists see this resolution from the House as an effort to roll back planning and zoning. And most Democrats in the House saw the resolution as laughable. Whatever, Arizona is considering the same. Georgia and New Hampshire considered anti-agenda resolutions this past year. Well, as I get to the point of wrapping this up, I'd like to get personal for a couple of minutes. For about 12 years, I've been actively involved in something I learned from my parents growing up, and that's property investment and real estate management, rental management. It's a great way to provide cash flow on your own hours. It's very challenging, interesting. I'm proud of my properties. I try to keep them nice in order to keep nice people in them. I'm also proud that I've been able to provide work. For realtors, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, handymen, bankers, lawyers. Now, for all of the time my parents did this, it was pretty straightforward. Buy a house, keep it, maintain it, pay the taxes on it, find somebody to live in it, bitty bam, bitty boom. But in about 2001, this all started to change. Inspections, landlord fees, regulations, often pointless directives. I'm being ordered to replace a roof on a very old garage. The roof does not leak. You cannot see sunlight through it. It isn't coming off. It isn't unsafe. It isn't about to fall in. The only problem with it is it doesn't look too good. The only one person in the world who can see it is the tenant from her bathroom window, and she tells me she doesn't look. Nonetheless, the city of Macomb, Illinois is saying I must do this, and when I applied for a waiver, they said no. I have many, many examples. I could go on forever. Agenda 21 has rather neatly paralleled the chronological advancement of my bumping up against the government in trying to have private property. So I began to wonder if there was maybe a correlation. One other example for you. A decade or so ago, I lived in Milan, in a house I owned. When I moved to Coal Valley, I kept the house and rented it out. Well, Milan's very good about trash collection. Anybody live there? You know, they'll even take an old non-working appliance for free if you just call them up and ask them. So one day the stove quit. The renters informed me. I called the village to get it picked up, and the woman said, "Isn't that a rental now?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That'll be $25. I said, "You're charging now?" She said, "Not if you live there." I said, "But wait, what's different? You know, I own the house, I still pay the property taxes, you're still getting the water and trash collection bill paid. What's different?" She said, "You are making money." So I guess, you know, if you're making money, the village government should be making money too. I felt a little ashamed, actually. That's my first memory of bias against private property, but there have been a lot more. So anyway, even though I've noticed this web of regulation tightening and the disdain for someone making money off private property seeming to grow, I have to tell you, I cannot prove, and it's hard for me to even believe, that one single person or one single governing unit around here is conscious of or even aware of Agenda 21. But what I am thinking is this: rather than outright hostility or agenda, what we're seeing is a trickle down of ideas, of attitudes. Because once it begins to creep around the nation, you know, that the good of the many is more important than the rights of the individual, and that personal property should give way to public property, and that, you know, there should be an overriding emphasis placed on the needs of the poor, then you see a slow creep of encroachment and an increasing hostility from government with more rules and regulations. Remember, HUD's land use book, 2,000 pages. Well, that's about all I have to say. I do want to point out another quote from that same newspaper article in the Tennessean. It says this: Agenda 21 was meant to address problems such as overpopulation, global warming, we all know that's a problem, and third world poverty. But it had largely been forgotten until groups such as the Republican National Committee and the John Birch Society began to link it to zoning decisions and other local government actions that they say limit property rights. Now, I do have to also say there are total other reasons for the hassling related to property. Did you know that in the Chicago area, everybody who works in the Chicago area, plumbers and electricians, they know they can do one of two things. They can work in the city, they can work outside the city. They can't do both. Why? Because permits are lucrative. And turf wars broke out. And so now they can either be licensed in Chicago or they can be licensed outside of Chicago. Nothing Agenda 21 there. I mean, I know fees and permits bring in a lot of money, and governments are strapped and keep thinking they need more money. And there are safety issues too, of course. Still, the excesses continue on all fronts. One of the carpenters I work with owns rentals in Elgin, an ICLEI city. He warns me away from buying there. He said it's impossible now. An electrician who does work for me lives in Carpentersville. He tells me, I love Carpentersville. I love my house, I love my neighbors, but I would move in a minute because it's not worth the hassle I get from the city every time I try to do any work. These are good men. They know their craft, and they work hard for their money. And I have to wonder, is all this hassle really the American way? What would the Founding Fathers have said? Did you know Benjamin Franklin was a huge property owner? Very successful. The pioneers, the entrepreneurs who built this nation on individual initiative. What would they have to say? Especially if the American way gives way to the UN way. Now I'm going to close with a mission statement from the UCLG. This is another Agenda 21 spinoff. United Cities and Local Governments. Headquartered in Barcelona, Spain. Barcelona, Spain, I'm told, is the jewel of the Mediterranean, so okay, why not? But if you doubt that there are links to America, note that the mayor of Bluffton, Indiana is UCLG's treasurer. Anyway, I love this mission statement. Now listen. The UCLG bills itself as, quote, the united voice and world advocate of democratic local self-government. Is that an oxymoron, or is it just ominous?
Say that again.
The united voice and world advocate of democratic local self-government. Okay, that's about it. The good news is we have an Agenda 21 and property rights expert right down in Jersey County in the person of Joyce Morrison, and she, I assure you, keeps me very well informed. She just sent me something that Amherst, Massachusetts has just passed a program, part of their green initiative, to give people rewards if they don't drive to work. So you're being rewarded, I think you can go shopping in local businesses. Now, is that bad or good? She's beside herself. She said, oh, what are they going to do next? Take away the parking lots? And then what are they going to do? How are you supposed to get someplace if there's bad weather? Well, I read into it and it said they give you 4 vouchers a year for a free trip home if there's bad weather. Is that bad or good? I don't know. This is complicated, but I do know that we have to keep our eye on it, because if we don't, it's the camel in the tent. Its nose is under, and its ears are under, and quite a bit of its head is under, and where does it all stop? The nationally acknowledged wise man, and this is Glenn Beck's go-to guy on the subject, is a man named Henry Lamb. We're going to give you a quote, a handout of quotes from Joyce, from Henry Lamb, from several other people. Well, I hope this has opened your eyes a little to Agenda 21 and piqued your curiosity to maybe learn a little more. Maybe we're a nation awakening. Maybe it takes an author like Suzanne Collins to focus us, if that's really what she set out to do. Mr. Hodges, who wrote that analytical article on the Hunger Games, says, as the Agenda 21 cancer spreads throughout America, it is clear that we are handing to our children a society with very limited hope. In the Hunger Games, Donald Sutherland plays the president, and he says, these games, you know, are all about hope. And the man who administers it says, hope? And he says, yeah, hope. As long as there isn't too much of it, we have to keep that alive. Well, you could probably spend days, as you've learned now, reading about Agenda 21 just on Google. Speaking of encroachment, Google. It's complicated, it's creeping, and it's coming. Thank you for coming tonight, for your interest and your attention. I know that Mike has in mind to have a little discussion afterwards. Again, I am not an expert. I see people out there who know way more about it than I do. So among us all, maybe we can answer questions.
Is the GOP candidate doing anything about this? I haven't heard a single thing about this here.
No, you don't hear much about this. Now, somebody tonight gave me a handout. You know, like I said, there's a whole lot out there about Agenda 21. And according to some people on the internet, Mitt Romney is more pro than against. Yeah, maybe Representative Northland was kind enough to join us tonight, and maybe he can give us a legislator's perspective. I know as a candidate, you cannot afford to ignore any issue. Not only is it bad politics, it's bad government. So if people come to you and say, you know, this environmentalism is a big concern, you've got to listen, and you have to formulate where you stand on things, right, Rich? So, I mean, but you were telling me, well, not necessarily. I mean, he may stand totally against it, I don't know, but the point is legislators do need to be able to hear both sides and then make your mind up, right? And you were telling me that you thought there was a lot of support for environmentalism in the Illinois House.
Well, yeah, thanks, Andrea.
You're welcome.
And
I'm sorry, I did just get here a little bit ago, and I apologize for that. I called Andrea beforehand. I said, I'm going to get there late, and I probably will leave early, so don't take it personally. But in all honesty, I will tell you that the way that Chicago is, and the governor and pretty much everybody in the House from Chicago, if you slap a green label on it, they're going to think it's the cat's meow. They're just that way. And it's pretty crazy, some of the things that they want to do, some of the things that they try to do. I think you were raising really good points.
Well, it might have been before you got here, but we were saying that sustainability, environmentalism, ecology, those are all catchwords, and Agenda 21 is never very far behind.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think true. I think, too, you bring up the point, and that is it ends up, once again, being anti-sovereignty, pro-control, and they'll do it any way they can. I mean, there again, Rush Limbaugh points out repeatedly, how many years ago we were all going to die in a new ice age? Now we're all going to melt and burn away. Which is it? Yeah. Whatever scare tactic they can run on you this week, that's what it is.
Freedom21.org, morph, M-O-R-P-H, like morphing.com.
Everybody think about this. How are they going to fit everybody in the continental United States on 25% of the land? Think about what has to happen.
We're going to get skinny.
What they're talking about along with that, because I know a little bit about it, I know for a fact that they're talking about making buildings big enough to house everybody. You eat there, you work there, you live in those buildings. Kind of like what they do over in Japan and China. Exactly. That's what they're trying to do. And they're like, well, it'll be better for you because you won't have to use your cars, and everything will be right there for you.
Who are they that you're referring to?
The government. The government is talking about that's what they will do to do sustainability thing.
One of the things that's happened, I was learning about this as well. One of the things that's happened is I looked at Rock Island and Moline and was looking for examples of this sustainable program and how it permeates or how it gets into our culture. And I found that the Ground Transportation Center that Moline built here a couple of years ago received sustainable grants. And I thought, okay, I want to know more about this. So I looked at it, and here was the really scary part to me. And that was that they actually had a whole section in there from these vendors that provide these sustainable services, and they're able to tell you that this is only maybe 4% or 8% of the overall budget, but you're going to get this grant that's going to pay for it. So now you don't have to worry about paying us to do it because you're getting this money over here. So now it's even worse because now we have a group of people over here with a vested interest in propagating this myth, this usurpation of our liberty. So now they're getting paid. So now they're going to run and say, oh, you want this grant? Oh, we got this big grant here, and it's $700,000, and you only got to pay me $7,000 to draw this up for you. So now, the city's sitting there thinking, oh gosh, we're going to save $700 grand. And yeah, we got to spend $700 grand over here. But that's okay because we're going to save this money. Aren't I doing a good job for the taxpayers? These city officials, and mind you, by the way, I invited them here tonight. I've invited the mayor of Rock Island, the mayor of Moline, and the council members. And I'm a little disappointed that I didn't see at least one of them here. Yeah. So, there's one of them that's sympathetic to the cause, and I'm sorry he's not here, and I don't know why. I probably will call him later. But this is just some of the ways that they are getting in and getting their tentacles into. Yeah, they're getting the control, which is what Andrea's talking about. I think it's important. I just want to share that with you, just to let you know, it's not some simple thing as far as people are just saying, hey, gee, let's try to be green. Let's, ride a bike instead of the car. I heard on Fisher the other day that the doctors, that this lady, this 83-year-old lady, was contacted about finding a doctor closer to her house because the carbon footprint of her going to her other doctor was too much. And it's like, really? You know? So, I mean, this is the kind of control that you can come to expect in a socialist/communist type world.
Ultimately, you have to ask, who are they? And
Who
then
are
you
they?
have to follow
Exactly.
the money. Where does the money go?
But you bring it up, because one of the things that I'd like to do as part of this here tonight, talking to you guys, because I don't know all about it, and I know there's some really smart folks in the crowd here that do know about it, and you know, we can discuss this afterwards, but you know, I have heard, I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard that ICLEI is funded, it was administrated through the Bi-State Metropolitan Planning Commission. I don't know if that's a fact. When I look for it, I couldn't verify it, but if that be the case, that is something that is subsidized through our county board to the tune of about $34,000 a year.
Federal government pays for it too.
And the federal government, well, I'm sure they do, but I mean, us here locally do. I can't control the federal government, but Mike McCall's right there. And I can say Mike, you know, and Ron Camper's right here, and Jane's right there, and these are all future, and Drew's over here, and they're all future county board members, and we can look to them and say, cut that funding. If this is a group that's taking our liberties, cut the funding. And we can say to our city councils and our mayors, we can say, hey, we don't want ICLEI anymore. We don't want to be a part of this. You need to look at yourselves and see if you're really giving the citizens what they deserve.
Probably the most important thing that we as citizens can do is just know what those groups are named and what they exist for, because you know that's how it works. The United Nations sets up these groups, and they have names, and they're boring, and nobody knows what it means. So if we at least know, you called it ICLEI, I called it ICLEI, I don't know, what is it called commonly?
ICLEI.
ICLEI? Okay, well, see there. I told you I wasn't an expert. But if you know that those are Agenda 21 organizations, then you are more informed, and knowledge is power. Yes?
Yeah.
I know, she's been very patient.
Yes, I got another web page that everybody can use, and even you, Andrea, is freedomadvocates.org. There's even deeper information into Agenda 21 in ICLEI and the United Nations, and even the international building codes and fire codes and stuff like that. And this book right here, everybody, what they're doing to our nation.
What's the book?
It's called a Global Biodiversity Assessment.
Global Biodiversity Assessment.
Look how thick this is. This is what they want to do to our nation.
How many trees did they kill to make that?
Two sides.
Yes, Tony.
Yeah.
And the thing, and you know, the paper my husband gave to you, I hope you study that. We care about you.
I quoted twice.
And Richard Morgan, I know I discussed it over the phone with you, but the smart grid, she says this about the smart grid. Please check into that and get a deeper understanding.
No smart grid, Rich.
Drew Milky, soon to be on the Rock Island County Board. Yes.
There's one thing that just popped in my head, and that is the idea of environmentalism as a religion, where it's kind of turned where, you know, like you said in the Bible, or Mike said, you know, we're the stewards of, you know, of creation. And now it's where, you know, we're not part of creation anymore. Now it's all the nature takes precedence over man. And that's totally backwards from what I was taught. And and it's really affected people's mindset. For instance, I posted on Facebook a year ago, gas is $4, and there it is again. I said it cost me $6 a day just to get home, get to work and home. I wasn't looking for solutions. I was told I needed to move. I was told I needed to ride my bike, which I-74 isn't bike friendly yet. All these wonderful solutions on what I'm doing wrong. No one ever thought that maybe the government's doing something wrong. It's my problem.
Well, I am more than glad to vacate up here.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll direct you to the person who knows the answer.
Well, I don't know if it's really a question, but they've announced that we're a FEMA 5 through the Arsenal. They're establishing FEMA 5. Does that have anything to do with this Agenda 21? Can somebody help me understand that? Why does FEMA need to come here? Why do we need a FEMA center? And
Anybody?
When we want them here, they don't come.
Well, part of it is that part of this has to do with regionalization. That the whole, that's a key element of Agenda 21, that you won't have your state sovereignty. You'll be turning things over to more of a regional government. Starting off, it'll be counties. So your a lot of your, like in Iowa, our smart planning principles, that's a region that's implementing that, of 6 or 7 counties. So that is step one, is get away from your individual community and your accountability with your representative. Suddenly, you don't your representative doesn't live down the street anymore. It's somebody in Cedar Rapids. Well, that puts it out of my reach, and you lose power.
And control.
And control. So, as far as the FEMA regions, there are the regions around the United States, and that's where, if you start to look at like your disasters, everything is hinged on the worst scenario, and if there's a disaster, we're all going to need to do these things, and martial law will come into place.
Has anybody else noticed how all of a sudden we seem to be getting all these public service announcements and everything on television, and it's all about disasters and survival and what to do in a disaster? And I think, why are they telling us this so much all of a sudden?
Giving us warning.
Scare you.
You want to share with us?
Yeah, a couple things really fast. Let me add, because a lot of folks don't know this. For one thing, whenever they try to push any of this the green energy stuff, they always say it won't cost taxpayers a penny. No. But here's what they do. Here's what they do. They force the power companies to use this as part of their profile and pay whatever the cost is. So it makes your energy costs go up. Okay? Yeah. So be careful. For instance, why do you think Mid-American has just bought more wind towers? Answer: because they have to, by law, sell wind energy. So now they're making it more.
Yeah.
Also, too, one more thing to add too is that when you're looking at these issues, they always try to sell it on that. Shoot, what was I saying? That was really important too. Yeah, it'll come back. But they always try to sell it based on that. What's the other thing?
Based on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll think of it.
I'll think of it. The other thing too is, yes, they're always selling it based on that. But the other thing to do is understand that. Stop again.
It's been a long day.
I have a long day after a long week. I'll tell you another day.
All right, well, I'd like to thank Andrea for everything she did here. And we normally give out the road to serfdom by that hike, but Andrea was very demanding and required.
I already have it.
Required hand sanitizer, so in keeping with the theme of Agenda 21, we have 21.